This is the first time I got repeated questions. So there's a pressing matter that needs to be addressed.
That's from Jason and Jason.
I will confirm that part of that is accurate. There was some desire to know what is the correct way to put the toilet paper roll.
What do you say? How do you say it? Top over the top? Is that how you say it?
Do we have any under folks?
The mullet.
Pastor Fernie is under.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like,
The only excuse for mullet paper
Yeah, but he's doing it backwards. He's saying it's the other way, like the thing's rolling down. Oh yeah, you're the backwards from all the other folks. Yeah. We'll give you all some conflict to resolve.
forget carpet colors. It's all paper.
Hey.
So the follow-up question is, what does it say about your spouse when they don't even put it on?
there's a larger question.
Allison, what type of counseling?
I mean, is the toilet paper roll still like the empty one's still on?
Yes.
Okay.
The cardinal view.
We'll meet in the
Okay.
office.
Yeah, we'll take care of that later. Yeah, we'll take care of that later.
But this is an issue with Alicia and I. So I'm real. She would call it OCD. I'd call it organized. And she's not at all. So this is a good example. Though honestly, this is a live example. She will often not replace it. And what I could do is be right, because facts, you should replace it. You were finished. It was there. It's your responsibility, kind of like the grocery cart in the parking lot. You should put it back. Yet, what I have learned, it's just who she is, and she's going to do that. And rather than huff about it or complain, I'm going to try to fight to an opportunity to serve. Those kinds of examples, you all have them times 15, And so that's where you can be a real grouch, or you can just roll with the flow and chuckle, giggle to yourself, and
You send pictures to your wife?
I have not done that. No.
This is confession time, Mike. We'll work it all out right here.
I'll know when I get the picture.
All right, what advice would you give to a couple where the roles are reversed and that the wife is the one that is visually stimulated and attracted, and the husband is geared more towards the relational aspect?
Yeah, I mean, that's where these kind of, specifically that last talk, can kind of be dangerous, because you're shooting and there's all kinds of exceptions and differences. And so that's where it's just so important for you all in maturity and wisdom and humility to talk, And again, the book, if you're not familiar, the book Love Languages overall has got some therapeutic psychobabble in it. And it can almost be a tit for tat kind of thing. Like, well, hold on, you haven't filled my love tank, so I'm not going to, and make it real gross. But reality and common sense is there are different ways to love one another that matter. So talking through it and say, hey, actually, here's some things. And humbly saying, you do this, and it actually doesn't do a whole lot. Someone need to get that child? Oh, there we go. There's Mama. That's your kid. Pastor's kid on the run. Humbly, and this is where you just got to be able to receive some news. Like, for example, there may be something, whether it's in the bedroom or outside, that you do a lot, and your spouse has graciously let you do it. And there may be times, hey, out of the weekend, that thing, it's not it. It's actually not that helpful or not that pleasurable or not that whatever. And we need to have the humility to be like, thank you, you're helping me, instead of offended. Oh, well, why didn't you tell me till now, blah, blah, blah. So again, in all things, the fruit of the Spirit, right? That's really what matters, is are you godly and growing in those fruits of the Spirit? And then these conversations are so much better.
So in Song of Solomon, you mentioned that the bride is speaking often, initiating often. One of the questions that came in was, how often should the woman initiate? Like, is that the norm, or what would that look like?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say the norm, but in Song of Solomon, that's an Old Testament commentator that just observes that. So when you observe Song of Solomon, that's what you do find descriptively. It's not necessarily meaning prescriptively, and you got to work it out on your own. So I don't know; it's hard to speak generally, but I would say normally the guy, if he's not initiating it, he's thinking about it, and there ought to be times where wives lead out in that way. If not leading out in that way in terms of initiative, and oftentimes with our marriage, it's more like Alicia has a much lower sex drive than me. I think I'm a little bit on the high end of men, and I think she's a little bit on the low end of women. So you got to figure things out with where you're at. But she will often, especially, she understands the utility of it, to where, all right, he's got a stressful situation, and say, hey, tonight, she still often offer. But it's more almost like trying to think of language she might use to be helpful. But it's more of an offer, not a taking initiative. It's more of, hey, would this be helpful tonight? Kind of thing, if that makes sense. And so that's not super romantic and not really the movies, but it's really helpful.
So how did y'all get to that point where those kind of conversations were happening? Because I'm assuming that's probably not where you started.
Yeah, no, but talking, and helping for me. And again, everyone's different. Don't hear this and think this needs to be you. But everyone's different. But for me, it really is. Any leadership is stressful. So I'm not trying to make pastors sound like divas or anything. But in stressful jobs, put it that way. It can be an easy way to relieve stress. It really is. So she has learned that, and I've helped her, to understand. Hey, I know you're maybe tired, or maybe this isn't convenient, but we can have a quick Taco Bell run. It's pretty easy for you, and it's really going to make a big difference for me. Because for me, and maybe it's not this way for you, it's a reset. It's a reset. It's like, okay. The world is So I've taught her that, though. She didn't necessarily understand that. So talking through, hey, a real easy way for you to love me is make sure that we're doing this, and you figure out your frequency, whatever's going to be best for y'all. So talking through it, and now it's just kind of the norm. And again, our biggest challenge now is we've got to fight to find the time to where we're not just tired. So we don't literally put it on the calendar. I'm not opposed to that, but we kind of have we realize, okay, it's been this amount of time. We probably need to make sure this happens.
So you're probably going to speak more about this tomorrow. Tomorrow at 9:45, men, we have a men's only meeting in this room. There won't be prayer meeting tomorrow. There will be a 9:45 men's only time. You're probably going to address some of this, but just in this room, we do have a different culture at Sun City with military.
Yeah.
And so, Taco Bell runs sometimes aren't happening for 9 months at a time. And so how do you help, or what were some pieces of advice you would give to particularly men in a fight against pornography when it is an extended amount of time of temptation and time away from their bride?
Yeah, it's a hard situation, and I have not experienced that, so I want to acknowledge that up front. I have not been on deployment for months. But what's easy and clear is pornography is wicked and evil, and absolutely not an option and never justifiable. So I think what you've got to do is, especially on those very moments of weakness and temptation, 1 Corinthians 7, that Satan is real, is having really high walls at the end of the day. You just got to have really high walls because you're super vulnerable at that point to temptation. Again, that's what it says, 1 Corinthians 7, you're vulnerable to it. So yeah, we'll talk some practicals tomorrow, but basically having really high walls to where you can't even get access if you want it. That's ideal. The ideal is that you can't access it. You've structured your life in such a way that even if you wanted to, you can't. So I think you just can't be serious enough about it in those contexts. Think about the teaching of the Bible, even Jesus, Matthew Matthew 5, notice what he says, if it's your right hand that causes you to sin, he doesn't just say cut it off. He says cut it off and throw it far from you. Your eye, don't just gouge it out. Of course, we're talking metaphor here. You can lust without eyeballs. But cut it out and throw it far from you, because it's better to enter glory maimed than go to hell is what he says. You can't get much more serious than that. So I would say being super hyper alert, high walls, lots of accountability. So if you're able, if you have a brother with you, that's fantastic if you have that opportunity. But if not, talking through the temptations and just not just hyper vigilance, I think, is the short way to say it.
In a post-Genesis 3 marriage, I mean, you went through the 6 purposes of marriage, one of them being procreation. We live in Genesis 3 world where barrenness is real. You mentioned last night even miscarriages are real. So how would you encourage those that are struggling with not being able to have children? Just what encouragements would you give?
Yeah, it's a real trial, both. And in churches like Sun City that are very pro-children, you're probably talking about children and family quite a bit. There's probably little kids running around like you kicked an ant pile on Sunday mornings. And so that can make it even harder because there's this right desire and you're just at this point not able. So acknowledging for one, and everyone here, if you haven't had that struggle, acknowledging that's a real trial. It's a real heartache, heartbreak, hard situation. And that's where the local church comes in, right, of coming along. Where you want to be is a point of spiritual maturity where, you fight that and you sense that and you long, I wish things were different, but you can still rejoice with those who rejoice. So someone else gets pregnant after trying for 1 week and you're legitimately happy for that sister. You've been trying for 3 years and you can't. You hear about her and they didn't even try. It was an accident. They got pregnant. And the heart of like, that's so good for them. I mean, that's where you want to get. What is that? That's just pursuing the Lord, right? Just spiritual maturity. So there's so many things that almost every answer we could talk about is make Jesus Christ king. Pursue him with everything you have. Exude the fruits of the Spirit and let him be your portion. And Matthew 6, if he's your portion, infertility, miscarriage, they're going to be easier. Not easy, but easier because you're suffering well because Jesus is Lord and King and treasure. So waiting on him, I mean, there's other things you can do practically, fostering an adoption, but at the end of the day, I think that's the goal is holiness, where joy is found, contentment is found. But community and being open, man. We should talk in the church, right? Talk with those. You know what? Talk about infertility. Talk about miscarriage. It's a shame that we don't talk about that. Talk about postpartum depression. We don't talk about that in the church a lot. We just need to be doing real life together.
Could you define submission for us and give some examples of what submission looks like inside of a marital relationship?
I think willingly follow is probably the easiest way to define it. And it is, I mentioned yesterday, a disposition that is eager to follow. So I think that's the best way to define it. And I mentioned it's not secondary or tertiary to the calling of a wife. Every time wife is mentioned in the New Testament, it's with the call to submission. So if you're like, I hate this stuff, you really got to get over that. You really got to grow in godliness where you love God and God's word, and therefore God's calling on your life. And the main one for the wife is submit in the Bible. So that's it's hard to say that in a feminist culture. It's where we're at. But here's the thing. The calling to the husband is love primarily. Main thing in husband mentioned is love. And how are we defining love? As Christ loved the church. In other words, death to self. How did Christ love the church? He gave himself. So practically speaking, submission and love aren't that different. Both of them are calls to die to self for the sake of another. Yielding my will to submit and follow his leadership, or him crucifying his will for the sake of her flourishing. So headship is not rights, it's not dictatorship, it's not privilege. It's the opposite of those things. It's you giving of yourself so that those under your authority flourish. So if we're defining and practicing headship and things like, woman, pass me the remote, give me a break. It's Christ-likeness. That's what headship is in Ephesians 5. To get back to character, man, all goes back to holiness at the end of the day. So a wise husband is going to be talking a lot with his wife about all decisions, especially the big ones. And so for me, I'm not going to disagree with my wife unless I feel like I really have to. She's a wise woman. We're talking through things. And in a marriage, it's actually very few big decisions, you know. They're all a bunch of the small things. And that's where love covers a multitude of sins, and we can give and take. So I want to hear from her on almost everything. And it's a bummer when there is a clash. But at the end of the day, when it does, I'm responsible. Glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility is that at home, I'm responsible. And if I end up going with her decision, well, we've talked through it, I think it's A, you think it's B, we're going to go with B, and if it goes wrong, godliness doesn't say, I told you so. Godliness owns it, because I made the decision at the end of the day. I'm the one who led. So there's none of that stuff. Same with you wives, you got to let your man fail. So if he picks A and you are for B and A goes bad, don't throw him under the bus. You need to let him fail. You followed him. So one practical example recently. So we're in Abilene. We kind of live on the south side of Abilene. There was a house that came for sale. And we're in this little cookie cutter neighborhood. The house fits us with 5 kids. We can grow into it. Terrible yard. Terrible neighborhood, really. And this house on 17 acres, a little bit south, came for sale for pretty cheap at the end of the day. Well, yeah, for a pastor's type income. She wanted it. Alicia wanted it. She found it. And we go look at it. I don't want it. I don't want to move. I hate moving. I don't want to go south. It's not really in Abilene. I don't want a longer commute. But there's this word. I think it's 1 Tim 5. I can't remember. For a woman. And it's, I think it's manager in the ESV. But the Greek is oika despot. Oika, like economics, house. Oikos, house. Despot, like ruler. So I'm sorry I don't have the reference to that, but I think it's 1 Timothy 5. So the woman is the despot of the home, ruler of the house. Now, not in terms of authority and decision making, but the home is her realm. So when it comes to the home, she talks to me about things, I'm not picking the color of the paint on the wall. I'm not, that's her realm. She rules it, oika despot. So when it comes to the home, I'm like, I'm not interested in this conversation. She's interested. All right, let's go out and check it out. We go check it out. I'm sorry this is long. I'm trying to get practical on how this works out. So my first desire is not to deal with it. And it's more costly than our current home. But we could make it work on the high end. So we go out there, we talk. She really wants it. And so she's at home. She's the realm. So I want to hear her out. I don't think it's the best decision. I don't think it's financially wise. But I want to hear it out. So we go out, we talk, we crunch numbers. We literally pros and cons, and she was ready. She wanted to do it. At the end of the day, I just said, we're not going to do this at the end of the day for a whole lot of reasons. And Alicia's a godly woman. And this is where it's just so helpful when you have 2 people following the Lord. Because she wasn't like mad about it. She believes in a sovereign God who's called me to lead the home. She prefers, her preference, her desire is the home, but she knows that she's called to submit to God by submitting to me. So end of conversation. Okay, we won't. No bitterness, no bringing it up, no huffiness, no cold, no ice in the air, none of that, because she's godly. So that's just sure helpful to lead. Easy to lead. You want a woman that's easy to lead, and wives, and men, you want to make it easy for her to follow you. Again, by being godly. You want to be a man that's easy to follow because you're not about yourself, you're about the Lord. So, end of the day, we said no. And if we had done that, we would have, this was 2018, I think. So if we had bought that home, we could sell it today probably for close to 3 times what we would have bought it for. Financially, she was right. But we weren't thinking about investments, and we weren't thinking about moving either. So it's a hypothetical. And I owned it with her. Financially, that would have been the wise move. Practically, I'm still glad we didn't move. And so now we joke about it. Like, probably should we have moved? Probably should have. All things considered. We didn't, and my mistake, and she's not bitter about it at all. She trusts. That's the kind of thing. We talked a lot about that. We talked about it a whole lot. So So if you're thinking these things mean that you're like a dictator or making these unilateral decisions, you're not reading your Bible and you're lacking common sense. That woman has the Spirit of God and a lot of wisdom and sees things that you don't see. So it's a ton of talking. But at the end of the day, someone is responsible for the decision, and God says that's the husband.
So in closing, what would you say, as everybody's leaving here, hopefully there's not going to be conflict as you're trying to get out of the parking lot and get home, but likely for some of you there will be. But what is maybe one or two pieces of advice that you could give everyone in here? Do this today. What would it be?
Well, maybe you can practically, I don't know if it can happen today, but in the next 2.5 days, I would say. And even after the sermon tomorrow, sometime the next three days, I would say, sit down and compare notes. And what's beauty about teaching and preaching of God's Word, there's lots of things the Spirit has brought up to y'all that I didn't even say, you know. And so having a good, meaningful, long debrief after the weekend. So you've had lots of time to think and to hear. And so sitting down and having a good evaluation. Guaranteed, many of you are doing great because you're part of this church. It's a great church. It means a lot of y'all are doing well. But also guaranteed there's areas. And some of you already know, like, yeah, that's the area on me. Some of you are thinking, yeah, that's the area on them. That's not going to be the conversation. Sit down and own it yourself. Hey, here's something the Lord showed me over the weekend. Hopefully it's many things, because again, we're always getting better, man, always getting better. So that humility of not taking it personal, but being able to own, yeah, I've not done great in this job, this area. So owning something from the weekend, maybe several things, and talking about it and getting the path forward. Also find something to encourage. Doubtless over this weekend, there's something about, yeah, I'm so glad my husband's this way. I'm so glad my wife's this way. Yeah, she's doing this well. Tell them, and resolve to keep telling them. So from there, I think you can have a lot of things, but I think the main takeaway is don't just keep going and get back into the rat race of life. We've had a lot of talk about marriage, is have a good, meaningful debrief with some specific next steps. Yeah, in this area, I think we're not great. How can we then get better? You all know what that is in your own marriage. I just leave it. Y'all figure out the specifics. But if you don't have those tangible, concrete next steps, you're going to get rocked back into the regularity by life, and this will not have been a fruitful weekend. James 1, right? Don't merely hear the word, do the word. So I would come up with a list of things that we're going to get better on, but also framed with, man, I'm so glad God's worked in our life this way. Celebrate where you're at as well.
We're at time, so I think I'm speaking on behalf of at least most people. I may get emails. You may have offended several.
Sorry, bro. I'm going home tomorrow.
We'll deal with that in the next week or so. No, I don't think so. But I think speak on behalf of everybody when I say thank you. Thank you for pouring into us.
Yeah. What a joy. Thanks for coming.
For your time and investment. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, bro.